Hello, everyone. It's the day after Thanksgiving, which is kind of like a holiday. So we're going to go a little bit early today. We're all 49ers. We got Tony Farmer, Nick Newman, Maverick Pallack, and Grant Cohn, me. We got 13 topics to get through today, so no intro. We're going straight into the topics. First topic, guys, the Niners have had a lot of bad luck this year, and it doesn't really feel like it's this year. But let's not absolve them of all blame. Let's list the biggest football sins the 49ers committed in 2020. Who would like to start?
I can start it off. I'd say one of the biggest sins was just some of the play calling in that Seattle game, just two plays in particular I still haven't gotten over, is the Jerick McKinnon Wildcat play and the Trent Taylor crossfield screen. And I think that was sinful. And you'll never convince me that those two plays were good, ever.
Yeah, good call. Good call. And we can keep adding to the list if things pop in your mind later. Go ahead, Nick.
Maverick nailed it. This is something we've been touching on a little bit over the past week or so. Kyle Shanahan playing his starters in blowouts. Yep. If you go back and look at the Patriots game, Deebo Samuel was playing running back when you're already up 20-plus points. That's how he hurt his hamstring.
Yep.
And Fred Warner was also playing with a 30-point lead. Why is Fred Warner on the field? He's your MVP. So a sin for me, Kyle Shanahan has been committing is playing his starters, continuing to play his starters, his best players, when the game is completely out of reach.
Kittle, too. They were down.
Kittle, too.
Down big.
Yeah, I definitely got to agree with that last one. I mean, I posted on Twitter the game that Kittle and Garoppolo both got hurt. I posted something to the effect of pull the starters now, protect them, look forward to next week. And sure enough, two big players went down. But to throw something else out there different, man, there's been a couple times, crucial times, though, when Kyle Shanahan has had some really questionable play calls, particularly on third and short. One that comes to mind, I think it was 2 games ago, or maybe even their last game, where it was like 3rd and inches, and they did a shotgun, like draw type run up the middle behind like the interior of the line, which is like the weakest part of the team. And I'm like, what are you thinking? And there's been a couple of those. Overall, Shanahan's a play calling genius. Like, he's had an above average, like a good play calling season. But there's been times where I'm scratching my head, and I think those are sins too.
Yeah, I agree. He's still a really good play caller. Still top 5 in the league. But my issues, I would point to the sins being their personnel decisions. I mean, letting Savon Ahmed go, who was an undrafted free agent running back they liked, so they could keep Jerick McKinnon, just to see Ahmed become a starter as a rookie on a playoff team. And McKinnon looked like he really should have. I mean, he's been gutty this year, but he doesn't have much left. So that's tough. That's one right there. And then the other biggest football sin, I guess, would be just the entire mentality, the revenge tour. We've talked about it before, but to me, you can't have that attitude in football. Football is a humbling sport, and even if you're the best coach in the world, you are totally dependent on the health of your players. So even if you think you got a good team or you think you're a really good coach, you really don't want, I mean, it sounds dumb, but you don't want to like tempt the football gods with some of that bravado and all that, because it's like you're at the mercy of, the MetLife turf and high ankle sprains and ligaments and all this crazy stuff. So I think in the future, the Niners will have a much more even-keeled New England Patriots approach to competition. Like, let's just take this 1 week at a time and see where we go and just be consistent. Let's not talk about I think that was really getting the whole season off on the wrong foot, the revenge tour. No, if you're lucky enough, you'll be back in that position, but a lot of that's out of your control, and they've learned that this year.
Yep.
What is the Niners' biggest silver lining for 2021? Even if they don't make the playoffs this year, is there anything good that can be taken out of this season? Tony?
I like that. I mean, I like that we cut Quan Alexander's contract. I think that sets us up for success next year. Also, however you feel about the 49ers 3 quarterback, they got clarity. We know a little bit more now. How durable is Jimmy Garoppolo? Was that just a fluke that he's gotten injured a couple times, or does he have injury concerns? That question, I think, has been answered. Could Nick Mullins be an absolute superstar stud? Maybe, but I think we did get to see a little bit of a picture of what Mullins is, and we saw him struggle, and we saw him come back from struggling as well, so we learned more about him. And so I think quarterback is obviously the most important position on the team, and we now know more about our 3 quarterbacks going forward into next year, and that'll decide whether we want to invest in a draft capital or not at quarterback.
The 4-6 record, I don't know if Robert Saleh is going to get a head coaching job next year because of the lack of success overall as a team. So that's
Agreed.
my silver lining, that you might be able to bring back Robert Saleh, and seeing what he's done with the defense. The defense is missing stars pretty much on all levels except for the linebacking core. So what Robert Saleh has been able to do has been so impressive. And because the overall team has struggled, you might have the luxury of having him be your defensive coordinator next season as well.
One thing
that's a good one.
To go back on the sin, I was thinking about it as a silver lining, but it could also be a sin. I think, Grant, you said this the other day, is we learned that it's not true that Shanahan can plug in any running back and still have the same success. We learned that Raheem Mostert, or at least a capable running back like Jeff Wilson Jr., is very important to this team. So that would be a sin, I guess, is not building that up a little more. But I'd say a silver lining is depth. I just think that Kerry Hyder Jr. really came on strong, and I think it showed that you can build a decent pass rush with a couple veterans. You obviously need that Nick Bosa to have a great pass rush to carry your defense, but getting Kerry Hyder Jr. in, I think that's good to know that there's a couple $3 million guys, or get Marcus Golden, Nick, and help out the defensive line. I think that was a silver lining, seeing the depth of him, Tarvarius Moore, Marcel Harris at times, Azeez Al-Shaair at times. That was cool to see.
Yeah, good answers. I really still feel like the Niners are a terrific team, a well-coached team and a good roster that has a lot of injuries for various reasons. And I think the silver lining is that they're going to have a higher draft pick than a team this good has any business to have, like 2 years ago. And they're going to be in a position to draft whatever they want, franchise quarterback, lockdown corner, right tackle, left tackle, whatever they freaking need. Edge rusher, they can get it. And they should be really good next year if they have a smart offseason and a little more luck. So that would be the silver lining for me.
To your point, Grant,
yeah.
It's almost like the Warriors situation where they ended up with the second overall pick, and you add James Wiseman with that core. That's a luxury of having all your players on IR and ending up with not Same the thing. Record you were planning for. Yeah.
No doubt. All right, let's move on. How realistic is the 49ers path to the playoffs this year? Let's not just write off the season yet. They're still in it, and they're playing a team on Sunday that has had 6 days of rest. It's coming off an East Coast trip. The Niners are 2 weeks rested and prepared, and they beat this team a few weeks ago. So how realistic is the Niners' path to the playoffs, Maverick?
I say it's kind of realistic. It's not like if they get in, they're going to win the Super Bowl. I don't think that's they'd really have to get hot and change what's going on to be contenders for the Super Bowl. But to sneak into the playoffs, one, they play the Rams, one, the teams they're chasing. And that, I think, is the most realistic team to switch over in the playoff race. Because here's the Rams' schedule for the rest of the year. They play the Niners, then they play the Cardinals, which the Cardinals could beat them. Then New England, who have been very hot and cold. That could be a win. Sometimes New England looks great. Sometimes they look very bad. Then the Jets, which I think we can all agree is probably going to be a Rams win. But then Seattle and Arizona again. And Seattle and Arizona could be fighting for that 1 seed those last 2 weeks of the season and could really need those wins. And if the Niners can just beat the Rams this week and then beat Dallas and Washington, that's kind of, I think that would put them at the same amount of wins if you count those last 2 weeks as losses for the Rams. So then they have the tiebreaker, and then the other last 2 games, they would just have to be even.
Well, that's what you just laid it out. Thank you, Maverick.
Yeah, that's a tough one to follow there, Maverick.
I can put out a chart later on Twitter.
I would appreciate it. I like a visual, a flow chart.
Yeah, we need a visual representation. I don't know how realistic it is. I feel their chances dwindled a little bit when the Rams upset the Buccaneers. That was a huge win for the Rams, And with the Cardinals losing to the Seahawks, I almost feel that the team to chase now is the Cardinals. And the Rams play the Cardinals twice. So if the Rams sweep the Cardinals, then all of a sudden you're fighting for that 7 seed between the Cardinals, the Rams, the Seahawks. It's so jumbled between the NFC West teams. It's a stretch to see the Niners getting in. I believe their percentage, the likelihood is around 5%. I don't know if it increased over the course of the weekend or over the course of the Thanksgiving games, rather. It's a long road ahead. If they can finish 9-7, 10-6, that may do it. but they'd really have to play well. And depending on the health of Raheem Mostert and Deebo Samuel, that's the bottom line right there. If you don't have those guys, if they can't stay on the field for the remaining 6 games, there's no shot.
True. True.
Yeah. I think it's very realistic. I was the guy 2 weeks ago who said they were done. They were out of it and completely reversing course. If you're interested, by the way, 49ers Super Bowl odds are about 100-1 right now. And I think
to win or to make it? To win or to make it?
The playoffs, they would be nobody would want to play them. Like if that offense was healthy, if Deebo, Ayuk, Jordan Reed, and Kittle, and those running backs, like who would want to play that team? But I think Maverick hit the nail on the head when he talked about the schedule. The Niners have the easiest schedule of all the teams in the NFC West remaining. I think their path is jumping either the Cardinals or the Rams. Maverick laid it out nicely that the Rams are maybe the easiest team to jump. How about the Cardinals? Does anybody trust Cliff Kingsbury, who doesn't have a history of winning in college, to not blow this? I mean, they're playing the Patriots this week. I think the Patriots could upset the Cardinals this week very easily. What we have to keep in mind, though, is that with the tiebreakers, the 49ers currently have the tiebreaker right now with the Rams. The Cardinals currently have it with the 49ers. So the Niners would have to beat the Cardinals and then also, if they tied, also get that next tiebreaker as well. So we know either the Bucs or Saints. Let's assume one of those is going to win the division and one is going to get a top wild card spot or a wild card spot. It really is those other 2 teams in the NFC, and I could see either of them choking easily.
Are we so sure that Tampa's going to make the playoffs? Tampa's looked bad 2 of the last 3 weeks.
I was going to say that, but it's Kansas City this week, then Minnesota, Atlanta, Detroit, Atlanta. And that made it hard. Yeah, who knows?
Okay, good point. Good point. It's just they've looked real vulnerable the last couple of weeks. The Rams are interesting because they haven't faced the Cardinals yet. They got some really tough games on their schedule. I do think there's a realistic path for the Niners, but really it doesn't matter what any of these other teams are doing. If they don't get Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson back like now, and they have to do another game with Jerick McKinnon being the engine of the offense, they're not gonna make it. So I think the path to the regulars to the postseason is they got to win 5 of their next 6, basically. And I don't even know if that'll do it. But if they win 5 of their next 6, I don't know which game is the most droppable. Maybe the one against Buffalo. If they could beat the Rams, drop the one to Buffalo, win the next 2 against the NFC East, and then be 7-7 with 2 to go. Maybe Jimmy comes back. Maybe they're healthy. Maybe the team that no one wants to face shows up week 16 as opposed to the wild card round, and they go on a little run. It could happen.
Yeah. Go ahead, Maverick.
I was just going to say a Buffalo win would be big because I believe they beat the Rams. I'm pretty sure they held on to win that game. And then
they did.
That would just be a big tiebreaker as well. I think they would own almost every other tiebreaker over the Rams. So it's just take care of business. But, of course, the Cardinals beat the Bills on that Hail Mary. That was that game, right? So then if the Niners lost to the Bills, then the Cardinals would hold that tiebreaker, or at least a smaller subset of the strength of schedule tiebreaker, if the Cardinals and the Niners split the series this year.
Tony, you have something you want to say?
Yeah, I just want to add, too. I think the 49ers are getting healthier, and they got this bye, right? While other teams are starting to have their injuries mount. I mean, the Rams just lost their leading tackler. He just went on IR. Drew Brees is out for who knows how long with all those broken ribs. I know the Packers have offensive line injuries as well. So the 49ers are getting healthy. Other teams who have less depth than the 49ers are getting more injured. So the stars could align.
And let me ask real quick. If the Niners beat the Rams on Sunday, but then end up with the same record as the Rams, wouldn't the Niners have the tiebreaker?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They beat them twice. So the Niners don't necessarily have to leapfrog anyone. They just got to beat the Rams on Sunday and then finish with the same record as the Rams. I don't know if they will because the Rams are actually pretty solid this year.
Yeah,
but they're not great. I think they're better coached than I think they're playing above their level right now. It'll be interesting to see what happens. And the Niners are going to have some help. Other teams might knock them off. Real interesting. I didn't think there was a realistic path. But now you guys have kind of swayed me. All right, let's move on.
But if Deebo and Raheem don't play, it's over, like you said. Yeah.
Who's the Niners MVP of 2020? And this could change over the next 6 weeks. I mean, honestly, if they make the playoffs, that'll be to be determined. But so far,
I can jump on this one. I'm sure the likelihood of this being a unanimous answer is very high. Fred Warner. Fred Warner. How could it not be? If you go back since the day he was drafted, since week 1 of the 2018 season, he started every single game. 45 games appeared in, 45 starts. He is the Iron Man that DeForest Buckner was from the moment he was drafted, just starting every game, anchoring the defensive line. That's Fred Warner, not just for the linebacking core, but for the entire defense. He's the leader. Where would this team be without him on the defensive side of the ball? I don't know.
Love it.
Not, I saw he's not up there in Pro Bowl votes.
What?
That's a popularity contest. Yeah, it's Devin White or one of the Levante David, one of the Tampa Bay Buccaneer linebackers that are leading the NFC in Pro Bowl votes. But that's irrelevant when it comes to All-Pro. He's playing at the All-Pro level. And not only is he the most valuable player, he's the most valuable captain on the team. He's the youngest one out of all of the captains. And I go back to that Packers game, a game he shouldn't have been in when they were down 34-3. He's playing every single snap like it's his last, just flying all over the football field, making plays left and right. And that's when you're down 31 points. So Fred Warner has been standing out as an individual player as well as a captain. In my opinion, he's the only one that deserves the C on his chest that's been healthy over the last couple of weeks in comparison to Mike McGlinchey and Eric Armstead.
Oh, I thought Mike McGlinchey would be in the running for MVP. Okay, fair enough. That's
yeah.
Phil, who wants next?
I mean, it's tough to argue with that. I mean, I got to go Fred Warner. You have to go someone on the defense.
Yeah.
You have to go someone that's played a lot of snaps because not a lot of 49ers have this year. If you're not going to go Warner and if you're going to cheat a little bit, Robert Saleh, even though he's not a player, most valuable person maybe, Robert Saleh has really been an MVP type impact for the 49ers this year.
That was my secret answer, but that's a good one. I actually think Robert Saleh has just as much of a claim to it as Warner. They're kind of like double dragons in a sense. Yeah, but okay, keep going, Maverick.
So I kind of liken this to the MLB half the time where it's just Mike Trout is going to be the MVP most times, and it's just who's going to be the second guy in the AL. And that's what I'm doing with this is Fred Warner is the MVP. So I put Kerry Hyder Jr. and Jason Verrett for the defense as the runners up for players. Because I think without Kerry Hyder, the defensive line would have absolutely nothing going on. Eric Armstead might be taking on double teams a lot to reduce his numbers. Some would argue, but I don't think he's in the conversation for MVP. But Hyder's putting up the sacks, and that's big for this defense. Mm-hmm. And Jason Verrett has probably had the best man cover corner season for the Niners since Carlos Rogers' best outside season in my lifetime. So it's been pretty good this year.
Yeah, I was going to say Jason Verrett too. It's Fred Warner, but I want to give Jason Verrett his due because to me, he's better than Carlos Rogers. Carlos Rogers was very good, but he was benefiting from the best front seven and the best pass rush. Jason Verrett doesn't have the pass rush, and he has allowed Robert Saleh to improve. I mean, Robert Saleh is so good right now because of Verrett. Warner lets him do a lot, but Verrett lets him call man coverage, disguise his coverages, switch it up. Saleh has improved. I think it's gone right to Verrett. He's the best corner they've had, in my opinion, since Eric Davis in 1995. I don't know how much of a future he has. He's had a lot of injuries, but right now he's playing like a team MVP. So he's been big. Okay, all right. Let's switch gears now and look a little bit to the offseason. And we're gonna finish with the Rams game and the matchups and stuff, but we're gonna make you wait for that. I want to talk quarterbacks now. I recently looked up all the quarterbacks the Niners have drafted since 1979, and it's a bad list. I'm going to read it out real quick, and then my question is, why do the Niners have such an abysmal record of drafting quarterbacks? Here's the list, okay? Every quarterback the Niners have drafted since 1979 in chronological order. C.J. Beathard, Jeff Driscoll, B.J. Daniels, Colin Kaepernick, Nate Davis, Alex Smith, Cody Pickett, Ken Dorsey, Brandon Doman, Giovanni Carmazzi, Tim Rattay, Jim Druckenmiller, Elvis Gerbach, Darian Hagan, John Pay, Scott Berry, Brian Clark, Joe Adams, Dan Hardwick, and Joe freaking Montana. That's the list of every quarterback the Niners have drafted in the last, 41 years. Why is it so bad? Who wants to take a shot? I mean, Alex Smith, great. Colin Kaepernick, fine. But the totality of that, I would think most franchises would have better lists than that. So what is that? What is that?
It's tough to blame one thing because these are different GMs too that are making these decisions, and so it's tough to blame one thing. They're also different rounds. You got guys that you just mentioned that were drafted early, Druckenmiller in the first round. You got a guy like Tim Rattay drafted in the 7th round, and so I think Carmazzi and Rattay were actually in the same draft, if I recall.
They were.
Two darts at once. So I wonder if I'm going to go with a theory of why this is happening. Is the 49ers lore of their great quarterbacks, Steve Young, Joe Montana, does that put pressure on a GM to find that next guy? Look at John Elway right now. How long has he been searching for the next John Elway in Denver?
That's
and how
true.
many times has he struck out and missed on quarterbacks? So I wonder, when your franchise has that history and that expectation of excellence at that position, maybe it forces you to make an error in your draft picks.
There might be something to that. I'm sure whatever the answer is multi-pronged and faceted. So it's interesting to like name the different things. There's something's going on here. So what do you think, Nick?
There's so many variables. You got 7 rounds, and going back, there was more than 7 rounds. I don't know which year it changed. So there's so many different things you have to weigh out and categorize. So first round picks, you're looking at Jim Druckenmiller recently and Alex Smith, and then Colin Kaepernick. You really have to lay everything out, because you don't draft a 4th round or day 3 guy expecting them to amount to anything. You're throwing darts at the dartboard, just like Tony said. So with this particular answer, there's so many things you have to consider and weigh out. It's tough to pinpoint. But I do also agree with Tony, when you look at the 49ers history of having Y.A. Tittle, John Brody, Joe Montana, Steve Young, there's a lot of tons of pressure and guys that accomplished so much. And there was also a lot of quarterbacks that were the starters for 6 years or more. So when that's the case, you're not always looking to draft someone to be the starter because you already have a guy there. I don't know if you were to take, ever since the history of the franchise, how many guys started seasons that weren't named Brody or Y. Tittle or Joe Montana, Steve Young. Recently, it's been a high percentage, ever since Jeff Garcia left and Alex Smith. So many variables here.
Point.
I'd say to a degree, a lot of franchises have struggled drafting quarterbacks in the last 20 years. Just think of the Raiders. They've drafted one quarterback, Derek Carr, now in the last 20 years that's really been good. And I think a lot of Raider fans also don't like Derek Carr. He's turned it on this year. But different teams, the Lions, Stafford has been their best quarterback in the last 20 years by far. And so that's a big struggle. But one thing I remember from last year during the title run, the NFC Championship run, is a lot of people complain saying, or I would see on Twitter, and you can take this for what it's worth, but fans would say, well, Garoppolo's no Steve Young, no Joe Montana. Well, they're Hall of Famers. There's only one Joe Montana. There's only one Steve Young. So if your expectations are for every quarterback to be Hall of Famers, then it's really hard to find that. But if your expectations are to find someone like Kaepernick, who it was a solid NFL quarterback for the Niners, or Garoppolo last year, who was a solid quarterback. I know he wasn't this year, but Garoppolo was, or Alex Smith, which I know I'm probably the most down on Alex Smith here, but Alex Smith was a solid quarterback those last couple years with the Niners. So there's expectations to be had, and I think they have definitely struggled. But I think probably 70% of the franchises out there have struggled. Think of the Patriots. They've drafted one quarterback that's been good the last 20 years, and he was, a 6th rounder? So they haven't even been great at picking top quarterbacks. They picked a lot of guys in the top 4 rounds, Mallett and Stidham and all those guys.
Danny Etling.
Yeah, Etling.
Yeah, I think a big issue is the pressure. I mean, Niner fans have very high standards for quarterbacks. They don't want Alex Smith. They don't want Colin Kaepernick. They don't even want Jimmy Garoppolo. They want Joe Montana 2.0. Even Steve Young Niner fans were a little split on Steve Young initially. They have the highest standards, and they will run your ass out of town if you don't meet it. I mean, if you're just Alex Smith, not good enough. And I think so. It's the high standard, but also the high expectations. When you're drafted, no matter what round, 3rd, 4th, 5th, people thinking, oh, it might be the next Joe Montana, and then you fall short. So I think that's part of it. But I think the other part of it is just, if you notice, of all the quarterbacks I've listed, only 2 were 1st-round picks: Alex Smith and Jim Druckenmiller. If you're constantly drafting 3rd round, 4th round, 5th round, 7th round, what are your odds? How likely are you that you're going to get a Hall of Fame quarterback? I think what the Niners can look for is that maybe they've been trying too hard to find the next Joe Montana. They did it in 1979. They got a Hall of Fame quarterback in round 3, and maybe somewhere in the organization they're saying, well, why do we need to draft a quarterback in round 1 when Joe Montana was a 3rd round pick? Maybe the smart thing to do is to wait. No, don't wait. Don't freaking way. If you do that this year and you wait till round 3 and you're going to get CJ Beathard again, you might get a Russell Wilson, but that's the exception. Just draft a guy in round 1 and make sure he's not Jim Druckenmiller. You should be okay. I think that's kind of the issue. They're kind of obsessed with getting that next Joe Montana or getting value at a position where it's really hard to find that. Druckenmiller should have known by the name. Happy Thanksgiving. I would take Alex right now. Can Lance read defenses? Funny how everyone figured out G. Roman again. Happy post-Turkey Day. Happy post-Turkey Day. That's a lot of questions there, but it does lead me into the next question, and that is about Trey Lance or Kyle Trask. Real quick, most Niner fans are looking ahead to the draft, and it's starting to look – all Niner fans want Zach Wilson. He is the draft crush, but it's starting to look like he won't be there. Trevor Lawrence going to be the first pick. Justin Fields probably number 2. And now it's starting to look like Wilson's going to be a top 5 pick because he's having a fabulous season. So if the Niners end up with any pick between 10 and 18, whatever, and 2 quarterbacks are available, North Dakota State's Trey Lance or Florida's Kyle Trask, based on what you've seen from them already, Trask is still playing. Lance is done for the year. Their season is done and he's committed to the draft. Who do you think the 49ers would be better off taking? If you have an opinion.
I think, at least from what I've seen with Trask, is he's kind of been projected in that late first, early second round. And I would prefer, if possible, to move up into that late first round area and get him in the 20s range, kind of where they drafted Brandon Ayuk last year. Because I think it's essential, if you are drafting a quarterback in the late second round, to get up into that first round for that extra year of control, kind of what the Ravens did with Lamar Jackson. Because if he does turn out to be that franchise guy, you're going to owe him a whole lot of money once he's up for a contract, and you want that extra year of maneuverability.
It's like what the Cowboys didn't have with Dak.
Well, yeah, what they didn't have with Dak.
Good call. Okay.
I like the idea of Trey Lance having a big-body quarterback who's mobile, who has the rocket arm, but his college profile, looking what he's accomplishing, he didn't really play anybody, and he's sitting out this. It's a huge risk. That's the bottom line with Trey Lance. It's a huge risk. You can point to Zach Wilson and playing at BYU and not playing against the strongest competition. The same goes for Trey Lance times 2 or 3. He hasn't played football pretty much this entire season. They had 1 game, I believe, and you go back and look at last year. But the idea of Trey Lance and the rocket arm and the ability to make throws all over the field, escape the rush, that's the kind of quarterback I personally want the 49ers to target. So the idea of Trey Lance, I prefer over Kyle Trask. But then you look at Kyle Trask, and he plays in the SEC. He's looked really, really good this year. He's not as mobile, which is a concern because the NFL is trending in that direction.
No, he's a pocket passer.
He's a pocket passer, and I also like Mac Wilson as a pocket passer. He's a big body guy, was playing at Alabama. He has a lot of weapons, but so does Kyle Trask. So if you're going the pocket passer out, you have to keep an eye out for Mac Wilson as well.
Mac Jones.
Mac Jones. Oh, Mac Jones.
Mac Dre. That's all right.
My apologies. Mac Dre.
Mac Dre's cousins. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, Tony, what do you think?
So I'll start off by owning my bias a little bit here. I lived for a year in Moorhead, Minnesota, about 10 minutes from the NDSU campus, and I got bison fever while I was up there. So I got to go with Lance. He just looks effortless when he's playing the game. To me, and I know it's against an inferior opponent, I get that. But to me, he looks better. His tape last year looks better than Carson Wentz tape his senior year. He looked that dominant. And they say that if you're going to take a kid from a school like that, no matter what position, they better dominate their competition and make it look easy. And that's exactly what he's doing. High ceiling, probably low floor, more risk. Mm-hmm. But you guys know I'm a gambler, so let's go with that high ceiling pick. I'll take Lance.
I keep going back and forth. I love Trask. I think I like Trask more than most people, and I think he's going to end up winning the Heisman and going top 15. But let's talk Lance. I mean, for a coach like Kyle Shanahan, Andy Reid, or Sean Payton, you kind of think a coach like that would gravitate to Lance because even though he is a boom or bust pick, if he's going to boom anywhere, it's going to be with a coach like Reid, Shanahan, or Payton, theoretically. Look at what Sean Payton's doing with Taysom Hill. I mean, you could argue that Trey Lance is a better athlete than Taysom Hill. Better thrower, younger, just as fast, just as strong. And if Taysom Hill can have success, I don't think he would have success in any team, But if Sean Payton can win with him and make him look the way he's looking, then what can Kyle do with Trey Lance? Now, Taysom Hill was a multi-year project. Lance might be a multi-year project too. And even if they get him and start him right away and just to speed up the process, he might lose a lot as a rookie and really struggle because he's so inexperienced. But again, if Kyle Shanahan is confident, if he's like, look, sure, he's a boomer bust pick, but with me and in this scheme by year 3, he's freaking Steve Young. How did I do that?
You added an R. It's okay. It's not a swear.
Sorry. He's freaking Steve Young. If that's what happens, then great. If not, you'd be like, you know what? I don't trust his arm. He's not naturally accurate. I mean, Steve Young completed 70% of his passes at BYU. Is this guy accurate like that? I don't know. He might be a tight end. You know, I don't know if he's a natural thrower. So I'm nervous about him. I really just cursed. Wow, I dropped an F-bomb. My bad.
Kyle Shanahan's done it as well. Hey, we've got a question for you on this topic. Of those 2 quarterbacks, which do you think is going to score higher on the Wonderlic, and which is more capable of handling Shanahan's complex offense? Because one thing I've noticed, I think he really likes those quote-unquote smart guys. You know, Beathard scored higher than Deshaun Watson and Pat Mahomes on the Wonderlic. I think Kyle Shanahan is so creative that his nightmare is having a quarterback who is stifling him because he can't use his creativity. And some would argue that's Jimmy Garoppolo.
It's Jimmy. It is Jimmy. No question about it.
I think everybody says Shanahan wants a tough quarterback. True. But I think a more underrated thing that he looks for is he needs someone to understand the ins and outs of his complex offense. And which of those two quarterbacks?
From what I've understood, from what I heard, they're both really smart. I heard that Lance was accepted into an Ivy League school. And from what I heard with Trask is he's always been a 4.0 student. I think he's already graduated. I think he's already graduated from Florida. He's a little bit like Andrew Luck. They're both, I think, off the charts with their intangibles. Both of them. It's not like we're looking at a Ryan Leaf situation here. Both of them are really smart. Good question.
The one thing I see with those two, Lance and Trask, is I think with Lance, you would definitely need your Grant. I know you want Alex Smith in to be the leader if they draft a rookie, and they would definitely need a veteran with Lance because I think he does need time to sit. Trask, I think, would be more of a starter day one, but I don't know if he has as high of a ceiling as Lance does.
Right. Agree. Agree. All right, let's move on. The Niners have had a lot of bad luck with injuries every single year that Kyle Shanahan has been the head coach. I mean, it was an issue in 2019. Luckily, the quarterback didn't get hurt, but a lot of other guys did. And then in 2018, it was awful. Even in 2017, a lot of injuries. And so usually you say, that's just bad luck. Nothing you can do about that. 4 years running, it seems like that if it were just luck, it would have evened out by now. So should the Niners just count on this evening out in year 5, or are there measures they can take to try to create their own luck here?
I think the biggest thing is stopping taking chances on guys who have a history of injuries. That's the biggest thing they can do. Now, we're all praising them for Verrett, and that has turned out to be a very, very, very good decision. But how many of us rolled our eyes when they first re-signed Verrett? It was like, here we go again. And so they keep taking chances on these guys. I mean, we could list so many examples of guys who have injury histories. And so that's the first thing. I don't know enough about the ins and outs of the front office and things like, do they have a good strength and conditioning coach? I don't know. I think nutrition is a very underrated part of injuries and healing and recovery time from injuries. Do they have good nutrition program? I don't know. But I think these are factors that if I struggled that bad with injuries, I would start to examine and micromanage those little factors that all play a role in injury recovery and injury prevention.
Yeah, that's a tough one. How much does bad luck have to do with it? I'm not sure. I don't know the ins and outs, just like Tony was touching on. Tony's health tips, everything you just provide as far as micromanaging, making sure these guys are staying on top. But one thing I totally agree with is stop taking chances on guys who have the injury history, just like Tony just said. I was a huge advocate all offseason long that they needed to add pass rushing depth, especially on the edge, the speed rush. Because you look at D Ford and Nick Bosa, how could you go into the season counting on Nick Bosa and D Ford? Yes, Nick Bosa played in 16 games last year, but you look at his college history and his high school history, he tore his ACL out, a partially torn ACL in high school. So you have to eliminate drafting these high-risk players or signing these high-risk players who have large injury histories. And it's interesting you brought up Verrett, because now it looks like he's playing his way towards getting a big contract. Do you want to give a big contract to a guy who has finally put together a healthy season and is playing extremely well? I don't think you should, but some team may be foolish enough to do so. And as we have been spending some time talking about the offseason, that's something to monitor. Will Jason Verrett come back on a 1-year prove-it deal again, just like he did this year? Because his sample size of staying healthy is not very good. Or will a team be foolish enough to give him a big contract?
I'd say the one thing with some of the injuries were, at least for ACLs, isn't it more just like if it happens, it happens? Same with the Achilles tendons. It's kind of just like if it happens, it happens. Yeah. But the hamstrings and stuff, those are the more preventable ones. But I have no big science background, no medical background, so I'm not the best option for this. But I would just say that it is weird.
Pretend.
Yeah, it's happened a lot, and the drafting definitely that's helped. But a lot of those guys were holdovers from the Harbaugh, Tom Sula, Chip Kelly era, where it's like, and I guess bulky is the common denominator there, where it's just drafting guys that let's get Lattimore when he has no knee, or wasn't it Julian Taylor that missed the first year of his career because he was kind of a project? And just, I'm all for getting guys that can help you right away and also build on that.
You guys are right on. I mean, not drafting injury-prone players is a great place to start. But I think that's what Lynch can do. I think there's something Kyle Shanahan can do as well, and I think he needs to examine this. And I only say this because I covered Jim Harbaugh and my dad covered Bill Walsh, and I know that Jim Harbaugh during training camp would have grueling practices. I mean, 3-hour practices. Kyle's practices are soft. They just are. In training camp, they are as short as possible, about 90 minutes, and there is no live tackling any day. I understand going light during the season. It's a long season. You want to keep your team fresh, and Bill Walsh was famous for having walkthrough practices during the season. But in training camp, to get your team ready for the weekly car crashes that you're going to get, I know that Bill Walsh would have live tackling sessions, not every day, but frequently throughout camp, and Jim Harbaugh too. Not every day, sometimes just goal line, but you need to have, I believe, you need to have live tackling in camp, especially if you're seeing 4 years in a row your players are having issues with contact, collisions. I mean, how many broken bones, how many high ankle sprains? I think they're having an issue with contact. And what Harbaugh would say is he would always use, I don't know if there's any science behind this, but he would say the human body is built for contact. It's built for collisions, unlike a car. The more collisions a human body has, the more of a callus it builds up, and the better it is at withstanding those collisions. And I know that Harbaugh would build up that callus for players if it's a real thing that exists. And I know that Kyle Shanahan doesn't even try because maybe he doesn't think it's a real thing that exists. But 4 years in a row, one of the most injured teams in the league, they got to try something else. And I understand he doesn't want to do live tackling because you want to keep the team healthy, but you're one of the most injured teams anyway. Switch it up. Try something different. And these are things that you think about as a head coach. It's not a coordinator issue. It's a head coach issue. And these are my questions for Kyle. Can you tweak things on this level? Can you help winning in different ways? Can you find ways to win that don't involve your playbook? The grease board. Because it's not always the next gadget play that's going to save you. It's things like this, This isn't an issue that Jim Harbaugh ever had. So maybe you call him up, see what he did. It's not an issue he had. And, Trent Baalke was giving him torn ACL players left and right. Jim Harbaugh still found a way to get his guys on the freaking field.
Grant, let me add this too. Not only are they bringing in players with injury history, but they're also trading away DeForest Buckner, who played, I think, every game or almost every game as a 49er. And you used one to re-sign Jimmy Ward, who has an injury history. So they're not doing themselves a lot of favors.
They don't value durability in a sport where everyone says it's the most important ability. Who cares how fast you are if you're never on the field? It's the most important ability, the ability to play football consistently and not get hurt. It's worth money. That's why Fred Warner's going to get a ton of money, because he's good and durable. And the reason that Jimmy's probably going to be gone is because he's good but not durable, and it's not acceptable when you're paying a guy all that money. Jimmy. Okay, we're 7 questions in. Let's keep going. We got a good pace too. Which undrafted free agent is priority number 1 for the Niners to re-sign this offseason? There's going to be like 21 of them.
Unrestricted free agent.
Unrestricted free agent.
I can start off with, I think Trent Williams is the most important to me because just how Justin School played against Green Bay.
Mm-hmm.
If School can kind of surprise people for the rest of the year, then maybe. But I think Williams is one of the best offensive linemen available this offseason, and he's a big priority. But that's the biggest. I think the first one they should re-sign is Jordan Willis, just because he's a free agent. I think he's performed well enough, and he's cheap. Get him under contract as soon as the season ends. Get him under contract for next year. Don't let a bidding war happen where he's going to be worth $4 million. Get him for cheap, $2 million. And that's what I want. Get back those depth guys that aren't a lot of money. Sign them first so that there's no bidding war over their services. Because no one's going to be bidding for him if he doesn't do much. But if you let him out on the open market, then things are going to happen. Not just Jordan Willis, all those type of guys.
That's a very good outside the box answer, Maverick. Trent Williams is left tackle, premium position in the NFL. If we see another version of Justin School like we saw against the Packers, you have to re-sign him. Without a doubt, there's a huge drop-off between Trent Williams and those next-tier guys that include Jaquiski Tart, Kyle Juszczyk, and K'Waun Williams, Kendrick Bourne. There's so many free agents. But Trent Williams, just because it's so difficult to find a high-quality left tackle, you need to bring him back. Unless, like Maverick touched on, Justin School plays at a very high level and closes out the season, depending on how much time, because Trent Williams' status is still up in the air. But if we see Justin School play at that 2019 level when he subbed in for Mike McGlinchey, Joe Staley, then maybe Williams becomes less of a priority. But for right now, he is number one, and it's not close as far as bringing back next season.
Yeah, I agree on Williams. Just in the interest of not being repetitive, I'll give a different answer. How about one of these cornerbacks? You know, whether you say it's Sherman, I know that people aren't too excited about bringing him back because he's another year older. We just talked about Verrett and the risk there, right? And same thing with Williams in the nickel position. I don't want to go into a draft and a free agency session where we need to plug 2 or 3 cornerbacks, because then that's going to force your hand and you're probably going to need to overpay because you're so desperate, or you're going to be in a situation where you now have to spend a first-round pick on a cornerback because that's what you're left with. So I don't want to be making moves out of desperateness, so I'd like to fill one of those huge holes with our cornerbacks before we go into the open free agency period.
Yeah, I think it's Verrett. I don't think it's Trent Williams. Let me see if I can argue this one out. I mean, the way I look at Verrett is he transformed the defense. He's playing at a very high level. I think he's playing at a higher level than Trent Williams right now. Now, I don't know how long Jason Verrett's going to last. He could fall apart tomorrow. But for that reason and his age, I don't think he'll be too expensive. I think you can get him on a reasonable contract and not screw up your salary structure. Trent Williams? That guy. If you re-sign Trent Williams, that's a 5-year deal worth $100 million at least. And maybe you say he's worth it, but he still hasn't played 16 games in a season since 2013. He's not getting any younger. I mean, maybe he'll be better next year, but maybe not. I mean, is he really worth $20 million a year at his age? I know it's like, well, if you don't pay him, well, what are you going to do? You start Justin School? That's true. But, and I haven't looked at like all the free agents that are going to be available. Couldn't you get someone who's not as good as Trent Williams, maybe give him a 1-year deal? It's really too bad that the Niners took away the possibility of giving him the franchise tag. That's what I would have done. Give him the franchise tag, but a 5-year deal worth $100 million when he's coming off a season where he'll play, I don't know, maybe 11, maybe 12 games, maybe 13 games, and maybe 9 of them were good. I'm a little nervous about Trent Williams, locking him up to that kind of deal.
I can read you the free agent. I don't disagree with what you say. I don't want to give him that money, much money, because then you're tied to him. You have to him. Justin School playing good this year, playing well, would have been great for this team's flexibility. But that next year it's Trent Williams, Russell Okung, Alejandro Villanueva, Jason Peters, who's 30, he's going to be 40, and Garrett Bowles from Denver, Cam Robinson, and Kelvin Beachum. So it's not
there's options.
Yeah, it would have been great if McGlinchey played like the front office wanted him to, and he could have moved to left tackle this next year. But I think it's pretty much Trent Williams, or they got to draft someone in the top 2 rounds.
Yeah.
Also, I think Trent Williams is definitely going to the highest bidder. He's not going to give the Niners a hometown discount. I don't think he did.
The one thing I could argue with that is I could see the scenario where Trent Williams played with coaches he didn't like, and he does like playing with Kyle. He did not play last year because he didn't want to play for some coaches. So I could see the situation where he would be like, the only way I'm playing is for Kyle.
Yeah.
Hey, if he wants to play for 17 or 18 million, great. If he wants to get more than David Bakhtiari got, hey, good luck, dude. Kick rocks.
Would you guys be comfortable with Brunskill as your left tackle for 16 games and then putting someone else in at guard?
I might be more comfortable with Brunskill at right tackle than Mike McGlinchey. Can we talk about that?
Yeah,
So McGlinchey at left tackle, Brunskill at right tackle?
No. McGlinchey at right guard, McGlinchey at left bench. McGlinchey played guard for a half a game against the Vikings in 2018. I don't know. He might be the next Alex Boone, the 6'8" right guard who's not terrible. I don't see how he can stay at right tackle unless he improves. He's killing the Niners. Killing the 49ers. What?
Grant, to go back to Trent Williams and David Bakhtiari, Bakhtiari is like 3 years younger than Williams. I can't see Williams ever getting a 5-year, $100 million contract. I can see it being in like the 2-year, $36, $38 million range, somewhere in that ballpark. Yeah.
Pick him up. Hey, if it's all that's all it is, and great. You don't want to just send away a Pro Bowl left tackle for no reason, but $100 million, you got to really trust him at that point. Okay. Why is Colin Kaepernick still not in the NFL? Who wants to take this one?
I'll take this one. So I wrote a column about this recently. I mean, I think the answer is systemic racism, and people aren't happy with what he did. And in their eyes, he's not been held accountable for what he did, even though Colin Kaepernick didn't commit a crime. He didn't break an NFL rule. He's never been subject to an NFL suspension. But I think that's a tough pill for people to swallow. What was interesting to me when I posted this article is the comments in response on Twitter are just filled with things that are just not true. There's so much misunderstanding and misinformation out there about Kaepernick. And I'm obviously a Kaepernick apologist. I'll own that. I've got some bias there as well. I saw his first start in person on Monday Night Football in San Francisco. It was the first home game I'd ever been to.
I was there too.
I've always been a big fan of Kaepernick. But when I see replies of people saying things like, oh, he had a deal signed with the Jets and then backed out because he didn't want to be a backup, and he was demanding $20 million to play in the NFL, and people are citing, these anonymous sources, these things that haven't been proven. There's so much misunderstanding out there about Kaepernick, and I think it comes down to racism. I do not buy the argument for a second that he'll be a distraction or a media distraction, because Antonio Brown proved this year that wasn't true. And I think 2020 has shown us the longer Kaepernick goes without being signed, the more ridiculous it looks, because we have guys like Antonio Brown coming back. We have guys like Bruce Miller coming back. We have guys like Aldon Smith coming back who have legitimate, scary legal histories. And then you compare that with Kaepernick and it just looks ridiculous.
He was initially blackballed for sure, and it's interesting to see guys like Josh Johnson get another shot in the NFL when guys like Colin Kaepernick are available. I don't know whether or not Kaepernick would accept a role as a backup. I haven't been really following along to see if he's been public about accepting a potential backup role. I did see he's been trying to get back into the NFL, but I totally agree with what Tony said as far as him initially getting blackballed, not really receiving any offers. I know the Ravens were on the fence about signing him a few years back, and that didn't exactly work out for various reasons. So when you compare his skill set and what he was and potentially still could be in the NFL, the guys like Josh Johnson, yes, he's a better quarterback than they ever were, probably still is. So it's very baffling in that sense. And even if Colin Kaepernick doesn't want to bring any of the things he stands for into his next chance in the NFL, I feel like it's inevitable. He's going to be pressed. Reporters are going to ask him, what's your current stance? Are you just going to make this all about football? So it's kind of inevitable to me as far as what the media makes of a Colin Kaepernick signing, but he definitely got blackballed initially right off the bat. And he deserves a chance in the NFL over guys like Josh Johnson, who was just in the XFL or AFL, whatever it was, whatever non-NFL league it was. So
first off, to the people saying or bad things just because we're nodding along to what other people are saying, that's because I'm listening to what people are saying. And that would have been big if people listened to what Colin Kaepernick were saying instead of interrupting and going on tangents. So sometimes it's better to just listen to people. I'm a big Cap supporter. I agree with everything Tony just said. And there's nothing else to add. Tony said it perfectly. If if things were equal, he would have been in the NFL because he was definitely a top 32 quarterback at the time, definitely a top 64 quarterback if you're just saying backups. But if Tim Tebow can be on multiple rosters where he's just a special teamer, when he was on the Jets, he was playing punt block protection, and he was on rosters and getting interviewed every time on ESPN, they had the Tebow watch. If those things can happen, then the locker room distraction thing, in my opinion, is way out there. I 100% agree with Tony, but that's all we need to say, really.
Okay, you guys did a great job listing all the reasons why he's not in the league for, that are out of his control. Let me try to give the other side of the coin, and let's see if I can even make that argument, and you guys tell me if I'm way off. The difference between Colin Kaepernick and every other player, the difference between him and Antonio Brown, him and Tim Tebow, I still believe Colin Kaepernick is the most famous athlete in the country, especially who plays football. If he's back on a team, it's a huge story in a good way, but it's a huge story. I mean, it's like Muhammad Ali being let back into playing, let back into boxing after being banned for 4 years. It'd be huge. And that's great. But I think the reason that, owners don't want him in the league, and I think there's a lot of racism there. But I think there's also coaches don't want him in the league, and I don't think that's necessarily racism. I think that's not wanting Colin Kaepernick to take over your team. Because when he comes on your team, he sets the agenda. He sets what you talk about, who you cover, and if you win, that's great. I just think a lot of coaches wouldn't want him either. And then finally, I think he bears some responsibility here. Again, I think he would have been on the Ravens if his girlfriend hadn't posted the tweet about like the owner being a slave owner. That was tough. That's tough. And, I think other owners are afraid to do business with him because of what he did to that guy. It's a tight-knit group. So there's that one thing, which wasn't necessarily his fault. It was his girlfriend, but they lived together. And then 2, the Atlanta tryout. Now, he could say that was fraudulent and that they were trying to set him up or whatever, but the league technically did try to put together a tryout for him and bring people there, and he ghosted it and then wanted to do his own. So I think that he shares some responsibility here too. It's a terrible story. It's a tragedy. But I think he needs to look at some of the choices he's made. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't really disagree with anything you said there, Grant. I think the example with his girlfriend making the Twitter comment, that obviously didn't sit well. I think there is some responsibility in his lap, even though it wasn't his comment. But whenever people bring that up, I always go back to Antonio Brown called Mike Mayock a cracker in front of the team. So what's worse, your girlfriend saying this on Twitter or you directly saying this to a GM in front of the team, and then people had to separate them because there was a physical altercation? To me, one is way worse than the other.
You're correct.
And you can't isolate that one Twitter comment and say that's why he wasn't hired, because Antonio Brown proved that not to be true.
And
one
of the things. Oh, keep going.
I just have a question for you, Grant, because one of the things after I wrote this article, a lot of people are saying he wants the attention and he wants to be a martyr. And so for someone that was in the locker room actually interviewing him, I'm curious, did you get a sense, and I don't know what your answer is going to be on this, did you get a sense that he was answering questions because reporters were hungry for that social justice angle, or were reporters ever asking football questions and he was sort of inappropriately misguiding it, steering the conversation to his agenda?
Well, you got to remember, before Colin Kaepernick became woke, before he had his awakening, he was the worst interview on the team. He would frequently answer questions with fewer words than the question that was asked. That was his thing. And it was almost a joke. Like this week, there were 550 words asked to Colin Kaepernick, and he responded in 250. That's the kind of thing Eric Branch would write all the time in the Chronicle. So he's the guy who didn't want to talk about football. You ask him on a Wednesday, what do you see from the Seahawks defense? They're fast. They're well coached. They hit hard. That's it. Thanks, Colin. All right, well, what do you see from – he was like – that was his thing. And I don't know what it was, but he didn't like talking about football. So then all of a sudden in 2016, if you ask him about not football, if you ask him about what's going on in America, he would go on and on and on and on and on. So it was clear, like, if you want to have a good interview with Colin Kaepernick, you ask that. You don't ask about what's happening on second down. You don't ask about what he's seen from the opposing defense, because then you'll get a 10-second answer. So it's kind of, you get it's like positive and negative reinforcement, right?
Yeah.
If I ask this, I get a good answer. If I ask this, I don't. I'm not an idiot.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I felt like I had heard, and you can confirm this or not, I had heard that he was actually sitting for the national anthem for a couple of games before anybody in the media actually noticed. And to me, that suggests he's not a martyr and doing it for attention. Otherwise, he would have been like, hey guys, didn't you see me sitting down? Like, why aren't you writing about this? He would have started the story himself. That's just my perspective on it.
My negative viewpoint of what he did was, and you can't prove it, and this is colored by me covering him when he was a young man and the way I saw him. But the fact that he was sitting and not kneeling, the fact that he didn't tell anyone about it and didn't make it a political statement at all, that no one would have known unless there was a picture, makes me feel like he was pouting because he wasn't the starter. If you remember, he'd missed time. They were kind of trying to push Blaine Gabbert as the starter because he'd had surgeries and missed training camp. And there was even some rumors that they were going to cut him because he wasn't physically what he was before. And I think there was something like, dude, Blaine Gabbert sucks. How are you doing me like this? This is ridiculous. I almost saw it as petulant behavior. And then I also thought he would think no one would ever notice. Who notices something like that? And then finally, when he was asked, he's a very smart guy. He thinks on his feet, and he's probably been thinking about this stuff anyway. That was my interpretation, but again, I'm probably wrong. So I wouldn't even assume to say that that's what he was going through. It's just kind of how I saw it at the time. It was like, did you just give like a Ferris Bueller like excuse, like really smart in your feet, or is this really what you wanted to do? I guess we'll never know. And the most important thing is that Colin Kaepernick was right, and what he did was good, and good for you, Colin. And if you never make it back in the NFL, you still had a overwhelmingly positive effect on the country, on the world, and we salute you. And I hope you get back in the league, because a lot of these teams are spiting themselves not signing him. I mean, I understand if you have a better option, go for it. But if you're down to Gardner Minshew or whoever some of these teams are playing, like, you don't want to win? I mean, I'm sure some of your conservative fans who won't like him that much at first will like him more if he goes 4-0. So I don't know. I really thought some of these teams would swallow their pride and bring him in just for the sake of winning. But I guess these teams don't really care about that. Good topic. We have 4 more. Who's the most underrated 49ers player of the past 15 years? Is it Colin?
What a switch up.
Who is the most underrated player of the past 15 years on the Niners?
All right, I got 2 guys. It might be on the fringe of 15 to 20 years, though. I think I might be stretching a little bit.
Okay.
A couple guys that come to mind, Jeff Garcia and Garrison Hurst. Am I outside 15 a little bit? Hurst, I mean, that guy, there's a couple years where he averaged 5.2, 5.1 yards a carry. He was a great running back. Comeback player of the year twice. I had that big run against the Jets that, of course, we all remember. I remember when Hurst got hurt in a playoff game. I think it was against the Falcons, like first drive or like first 5 minutes of the game. You knew the Niners had no chance to win that game once Hurst went down because he was so valuable to the team. But underrated because he shared a sideline with Jerry Rice, Steve Young, T.O., some of these big names. And so he never really, I don't think, got the respect he deserved. And then Jeff Garcia, man, I really feel like because Jeff Garcia isn't like a super like masculine, deep voice, like look at me, like that people have probably underrated him his whole career. I just look at the numbers that he put up. They speak for themselves. Not Steve Young, not Joe Montana, but really darn good.
Great answers. And if you want to go back 15, 20, 25 years, go for it. Go for it. That was good.
Well, my lifetime only goes back 25 years, so we'll keep it within that.
Right.
I did an all decades team over the course of the summer, focusing on the best players from 2010 and 2019. And people were outraged in the comments that I had Vernon Davis over George Kittle. George Kittle is a phenomenal talent, and Vernon Davis was really overshadowed because he was on a team with an excellent defense, a team that had Frank Gore. If you look at what Vernon Davis accomplished, 2 years with 13 touchdowns, led the NFL with 13 touchdowns 1 year, a couple seasons with over 900 yards, was never an All-Pro, had 2 Pro Bowl seasons. He has the Saints game. He has one of the most memorable plays in 49ers franchise history. So Vernon Davis doesn't get the respect or acknowledgement I think he deserves for being as great of a tight end as he was because of Patrick Willis and Frank Gore and all the other great pieces the 49ers had on those 2011, 12, 13 teams.
And they were run-first offenses. Imagine if he played his career with the Steelers or the Packers.
Yep.
I'll go with I'm sure a lot of people are feeling this. Justin Smith, I thought, was underrated. Even though he made Pro Bowls, I think he made 5 Pro Bowls. I'll tell you exact 5 Pro Bowls, 1-time All-Pro. I thought he played better than that. And then Grant, I think we talked about a couple weeks ago the best player of the 2010s, and I went with Navarro Bowman. And I still think he's underrated just because I think he is a top 4 Niner of my lifetime, top 5 maybe, if you really want to push it. But he was one of the best players on the team every single year. And once he got that injury, that's when the defense kind of lost its edge.
Great answers. I'm going to go with Alex Smith. His best years were not with the 49ers. But, in retrospect, they might have gotten rid of him incorrectly. As great as Colin Kaepernick was, Alex Smith was the one who had longevity in ways that even Jeff Garcia didn't. I mean, Jeff Garcia had some rough years on some other teams. Alex Smith has been one of the steadiest quarterbacks in the NFL the past decade. I mean, you can't knock him in any way. He's been doing this for 10 years now. And what he did last night against the Cowboys on national television was just classic Alex Smith. He's a little boring, but he usually wins. And I think it's interesting that Niner fans couldn't wait to run him out of town. He was such a disappointment for Niner fans. He wasn't Aaron Rodgers. He wasn't Colin Kaepernick. And so they didn't appreciate what he did do and never really was given his due. And when his career is over, I think other franchises will have a bigger appreciation for what he was than the Niners, which is too bad because he should have been a Niner. I mean, they drafted him. They developed him. They almost ruined him. Alex Smith, most underrated player of the Niners past 15 years.
Can I give one more that I had trouble pulling up the stats for?
Sure.
Isaac Sopoaga, I said him again a couple of weeks ago.
Isaac Sopoaga, that's a good one.
He's my guy. He'll always be my guy.
Guys, we're running out of time. I got 3 questions left, and Shanahan talks in 11 minutes. So lightning round, okay? Lightning round. 3 questions.
Let's do it.
The likelihood of Deshaun Watson, what the Niners got to do to beat the Rams, and an over-under. Let's see if we can knock this out in the next 7 minutes, all right? So, Nick, you've been bringing this up, and it's really intriguing. You say the Niners should trade for Deshaun Watson. He requested a trade last year. There's no real reason for the Texans to trade him, but they also can't build around him. They don't have cap space. They don't have draft picks. It might be smarter for them to leverage him into picks. So, what do you think? Can the Niners pull this off? Could they trade for Deshaun Watson? Who wants to go first?
I can start off. I don't think they can because I think that the way the Texans do get a coach like Eric Bieniemy, which I think is the best option for them, is to have Deshaun Watson on the roster. Obviously, they replenish their draft stock with getting a bunch of picks for Watson. But I also think it's hard because right now they don't have a GM. Until they commit to a GM full time, it's going to be an issue trading for a franchise quarterback.
The one thing that makes this so complicated is that there's a much greater cap hit if the Texans trade him before June 1st. And of course, the draft happens before June 1st. So that's a major complication. If you take that equation off the table, would 3 first-round picks be enough for the Texans to bite on trading Deshaun Watson? I think it's likely. And the reason why I'm an advocate for this, we talked about this before we went live, that if the 49ers want to jump to grab a guy like Zach Wilson, they're going to have to part with multiple first-round picks anyway. And whenever you draft a quarterback, there's a huge unknown. There's a huge chance that quarterback may be a bust. Deshaun Watson's 25 years old. If you trade for him, you're on that tier where you have a quarterback that will keep you competitive year in and year out. The 49ers are possibly in first place right now with Deshaun Watson, despite losing Nick Bosa and everything else. 25 years old. He's owed a lot of money, but you have your core guys intact. You have Deebo Samuel for 2 more years, Brandon Ayuk 4 more years, Nick Bosa 3 more years. So you have enough pieces around. It would just complicate re-signing Fred Warner. I would do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I'm just worried about the salary. I feel like if you're going to if you're going to move on from Garoppolo, big salary, that's one of the biggest reasons you move on from Garoppolo is the salary. You don't replace him with someone else that's got a huge salary. If it happened, I'd be excited. Don't get me wrong, but what it would take and the salary issue is a concern.
It's possible that the Niners are going to balk at replacing Garoppolo unless they can get someone that's definitely better. It might be a hard sell to the fan base to say, look, we're getting rid of Jimmy, who you love, and bringing in Trey Lance and his 318 pass attempts from college. I mean, you'd be taking a step back before you take a step forward. Mm-hmm. If you get Deshaun Watson, you can sell that to the franchise. That's a clear upgrade. Deshaun Watson is the highest rated quarterback of all time, technically. He just passed Russell Wilson. He qualifies. If you have that guy, you have a quarterback who's just as talented as Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, better than Jared Goff. I like drafting a quarterback. I don't think you need to have the best quarterback in the league to win a Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. But if the thing that's interesting about it is he could request a trade again. He could say, guys, I don't want to be here. There's no future here. Just like, Giannis in Milwaukee with the Bucks. And if so, I think the Niners should be the first people to call. If you do trade 3 first-round picks and pay all that money for someone, it's Deshaun Watson or Patrick Mahomes. So I wouldn't be necessarily against it. And I like Kyle Trask, but like you said, he could bust. We've never seen him in the NFL. We've seen Deshaun Watson. Yeah, it'd be interesting. And if he requests a trade, the Niners should be all over that. All right, that's quick. Now, what do the Niners need to do to beat the Rams?
Feed Debo. I mean, give that man the ball. He's got to be like a golden china shop right now, not playing. I love him on those reverse runs. I love him in hockey. Give that man the ball as much as possible.
They got to run the ball. I'm very interested to see how the Rams adjust to the game plan, the 49ers game plan, because they made them look so bad when they played a few weeks back. The short area passing game, I'm interested in particular to see how the Rams adjust to that. It's tough to throw the ball downfield against the Rams secondary. So the key to me for the 49ers winning this game is if Raheem Mostert plays, if Jeff Wilson Jr. plays, feed it to those guys. There's no reason why the 49ers should be less of anything shy of 30 rushing attempts. Run the ball.
Yeah, to win, they need Mostert or Jeff Wilson Jr. healthy, and they need Debo healthy. And then Kyle Shanahan needs to call the game as if Jimmy Garoppolo's at quarterback, not what he's been doing with Nick Mullins lately.
Play your best players. Don't freaking start Jerick McKinnon. They're 1-3 when he starts. He's not a starting running back. He really makes it hard to win because he can't handle more than – he should have like 3 carries a game and 3 targets. That's where he's at. When you give him 10, 11, 12 carries a game, you're just putting yourself in 2nd and 9 a lot. So don't start Jerick McKinnon. That's what I would say. Start Austin Walter if you have to. But no, I think the fact that they should have Tevin Coleman, Raheem Mostert, they should be able to like spread the carries around and give McKinnon a little bit, but do not start him. It's like the Tevin Coleman rule from last year. Finally, over-under for this game, pick a winner.
The spread is the 49ers are getting 6.5 points, and the over-under is 44.5.
Okay, I'll take the 49ers against the spread, and then I think the Niners are going to win if Mostert plays, and I'm thinking he's going to play. So I think they win, and then I'd say over.
I'm going Niners win 23-17. Big day for Raheem Mostert if he plays. So that goes under, and the 49ers win outright.
I'm going to say Niners by 3 with the upset. By the way, Niners money line $10 will win you about $24 right now. I'm going to go under. You got 2 divisional teams in a second time they're playing, so there's some familiarity. So I tend to lean under in those situations.
I think the Niners are going to win, and I think it's going to be a higher scoring game because I think there's going to be some turnovers on both sides. I don't expect either offense to play well, but I think both offenses could struggle so much that it could lead to points for both teams. So I'm going over, and I'm going the Niners to win. And I'm probably going to change my mind on the over-under again in about 5 minutes. But that's where I stand right now. I'm sticking to it. Guys, thank you so much for the lightning round. Really, you guys were great today. And the people watching, some of your best work too. You've never watched better than you watched today. So thank you, everyone. And we'll be back soon.